Welcome. This is Stephen Lee, and this is Life and the Living of It. I occasionally find myself listening to people who are told something too late, something that they needed to hear, or that the message came from the wrong person or the wrong time to have made a significant difference in their life. Oftentimes they heard the message after the damage had been done, when they really needed to hear from that someone close in their life, when it might have mattered. I found it interesting, the more people I talked to, almost all of them could point to a particular place and time and person and situation from whom they needed to receive a message of hope, and the lack thereof was formative for them for all the wrong reasons. Years ago, I came to know Drew as a queer, single ex-dad who is extremely angry at the church and Christianity in general, and priests in particular. I remember the first time I met Drew. I wore a black t-shirt with my gold-ish cross from Walmart, and I think the first impression I left with him was not a good one. Have you ever seen a smoldering anger behind somebody's eyes? Like if they were just a little less civilized, they would have attacked you. I had never felt that kind of raw anger and distrust from a person I had just met. But as I got to know Drew, I came to see why. Drew called himself an ex-dad. When he said this, I feared the worst, that his child had died somewhere along the way. Instead, I learned that about 7 years after their daughter was born, he came out to his wife. And she not only took it as a betrayal and dropped him and forced him out of the house and divorced him with prejudice, but she immediately started legal proceedings to remove all parental rights from him as a father. He tried to fight it, but he wasn't a rich man. The people that they were friends with when they were a couple were on her side. The priest that they had both come to trust in their church was also on her side. Other people from their church was also on her side. And a string of rumors started going around that were totally untrue, but were used in court to get him declared emotionally unfit to have shared custody of their daughter. And one of the prime character witnesses for his wife was the priest, and he eventually lost all rights. He was not only angry at how she treated him and how the priest treated him, but he was so broken up by the situation and dealing with the huge emotional consequences of coming out as a gay man that he felt that at that time in his life he couldn't have put up the fight that he needed to put up. He had hoped during that time that his mother would have supported him, but she did not. He said his mother at the time was unsure if having joint custody with a gay man was totally in the interest of her granddaughter. She did nothing to reassure him that he was a good father, that it was right for him to fight for shared custody, that it was truly okay to be devastated by all that happened, and to feel hurt and angry that his rights as a father were being challenged and taken away. She didn't do any of that. He did, in fact, feel truly alone. And he plunged into years and years of depression, which only made it harder every few years, bringing up the custody issue again. While they shouldn't count against someone taking medications for depression, the courts sure did. And he still blamed himself. He let down their daughter for not fighting harder. Many years later, his mom came to see him as himself. She came to terms with his identity and his sexuality. But at that point, he said it was too late. He had lost his daughter. He had lost years blaming himself. He had gone through the long, dark time of the soul without her. Her support that would have made a difference made no difference at all now. Not to how he felt about himself. Not to recovering his parental rights. His daughter was an adult now. An adult he had tried to get in contact with, but she was very bitter about him abandoning her. In his eyes, his mom's words were too little, too late. And as I was hearing this from this tear-streaked single father of all that he had lost, without really knowing it, I uttered the words, "You fought the best that you can with what you had," that what was done to him was unjust and unfair and cruel, that in his emotional extreme he was taken advantage of by his wife, by the priest, by the people in the church, by the courts, and the only real love of his life, his daughter, was taken away from him when he needed those loving relationships in his life to support him and help him, and they weren't there. And I also realized at that time that my words, as true as they were, as supportive as I was, were also too late, and not from the right person. They were again too little, too late. And from that conversation, I could remember other times with other people when they cried out, "Why couldn't they have told me when it would have made a difference?" Now, when the subject comes up, and it always does, when people care but don't understand what their loved ones are doing, or thinking, or feeling, or they focus on the actions but forget to affirm the person, I sometimes bring up my story of Drew as a cautionary tale that you support the person even and especially when you don't understand them, that you don't burn the bridges that don't need to be burned, that it is so important even and especially when people do things we don't agree with or understand, we make sure to let them know they are still loved, that we affirm them even more than we criticize their actions, that we affirm them more than we hold our tongues on their choices, that we affirm who they are even in the face of disagreements or fights, or even when you feel they have hurt you. Because most of the time we don't have to slam the door shut. Because if criticism or disapproval are the last word someone hears while they're going through an emotional crisis, the chance to say the right words at the right time when they could have done the most good may be lost. Because supporting and helping and loving someone, even if the thing that you're working together for doesn't happen. Let's say that Drew never got custody back. He would have known his mother and his friends and the people in his church were with him, and he was not alone. Drew is a cautionary tale of words that needed to be spoken but were not. Words of hope and love and compassion and understanding, which become at the right time words of life. And this is life, and the living of it.